Welcome, friends of the Dice Never Lie Gaming Network. As always, I am DM Marathusha. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session while we enter the world of Tolus, City by the Spire, and enjoy a little bit of today's Dungeons and Dragons. It is a pleasure to have you taking your time to choose to listen to or watch us on this streaming service. As always, we appreciate you choosing to listen to the content that we have to share. It is a pleasure for us to enter the gaming environment and share these sessions with all those who would choose to listen. But in the long run, I also thank my players for taking the time to recap for themselves what happened last week and to try to pick up on some of the things that they might have missed and fill in some of those notes. All around, that is what these are essentially provided. So thank you all very much. If you end up with any questions or thoughts, please do not hesitate to reach out. As always, we can be contacted over Discord, and my Discord information, different social media information, is available at the start and end. But as always, thank you very much for tuning in. Enjoy today's session as we return to Tolus City by the Spire and enter the investigation of the Twin Star Marauders with Jinx and Dalton searching after the mystery of what assails Fawn Quartermain. Go into Old Town and go to the actual library. Otherwise, the actual official headquarters is in the Undercity, just below Delver Square, and that's where you can have her name offhand right now. Erica Sue is in the headquarters.
I don't necessarily need to RP like joining it, and unless like Dalton or Davros have like some specific questions that we could ask or whatever, I'm totally cool just hand waving that.
Yeah, nothing specific from me.
So what's the VIP package? Is it 20?
Yeah, 20 is the full guild membership.
I would like one all out ball out, sir. 20 gold deducted.
With full guild membership, you have access to the guild library anytime you require. You are able to see the library, enter the map room. You can use any way stations that you would like. If you do use a way station, though, you have to replenish anything that you do take in a way station. And then eventually you are welcome to next year, if you are interested, to rejoin as a master delver.
I'm sorry, you said Master Gilded? There's like a level up?
There's actually two levels beyond the guildsman. The associate guildsman has to pay anytime they would access the map room or any of the library. The master delvers have access to any sort of insurance, including retrieval insurance, were they to pass away. They are able to vote, but otherwise have the similar access as other guilders. And then grandmasters have many things beyond that as well.
Oh wait, which one am I again?
You've joined just as a guildsman.
I'm just a regular guildsman. Oh. And how much is it for the upgraded, the next package?
You actually have to prove yourself. You have to be a guildsman or an associate guildsman for at least a year before you have access to a master's delver.
Interesting, interesting. Now, and is that year flexible based on accomplishments, or is there like check boxes I need to get through if I want to upgrade?
You have to stay alive. That's a pretty solid checkbox for many guild delvers. But otherwise, it will be for the 2024 year that you will have access. So if you're able to survive approximately 8 more months, you'll have access to that. We take dues for the year coming. You're not required to be 12 months. Um, until later in this year we'll start to move into 2024 year. It really gets complicated as you start to grandfather in based on the month joining.
Yeah, fair enough. I wouldn't waste my time doing all that paperwork quite yet. I tend to live my life one day at a time. And I'll give him a wink. I'll say a betting man would probably bet against me.
That's unfortunate. I have to file all of the paperwork regardless. But for what it is worth, we prefer guildsmen not to pass away. It doesn't always look the best, but worry not, there's always another Delver coming to the city.
I know that's right. I'll try my hardest. Appreciate it. Feels good to be a part of something, I guess. I'll like shake my pouch and I feel it's like 20 gold lighter and I'll get just a little bit sad.
Yeah, the Delvers Guild ends up being kind of a solid resource as far as a lot of things go. Again, they keep pretty neutral on a lot of things, so there's not really much that you have to like stick to as far as their rules go. By and large, they are all about the treasure life. Effectively, they are adventurers, or what Tolus is. But yeah, that would just be kind of like a part of your day, going off into Delver Square and going to see Erica Sue in the Delver's HQ. She can get everything kind of sorted for you, and give you access to those things. Are you still kind of playing venues in the same way as last week?
I think I would have been a little too busy running around town, spending up all this money. I'm gonna drop another 25 at my orphanage, and a little special thanks for sending Seraph and the rest of the crew to actually like bring me back alive.
Damn, I didn't actually note. What was that, the Sisters of Silence? Do you remember who your orphanage was?
Not like the specific name of the orphanage or anything, but yeah, it was the sisters.
Order Dyra. Okay. My bad. I just want to attach that to your character.
Will you spell
Uh,
that?
Dyra is Dayra. The Day of Ra. Um, and then again, one of the things is like the actual sister is Sister Dyra Margaret. So they all go by Sister Dyra. And then they all effectively also have a name that delineates them. But essentially they all are, it's like in Project, damn it, I can't believe I can't think of the name. Nobody has a name until you die. They don't really have names or individuality, but if you needed to single them out, they still have a name. Any thoughts about what Dalton has been doing potentially for the last 2 weeks, but effectively for the last week?
Yeah, so I was thinking maybe he kind of he might have come down with something, which would explain maybe why he um, kind of wasn't with Jinx and Malchin for the whole time in this past week. So he's been kind of recovering. He came down with
I
a
feel like
stomach
you
bug or
had a
something.
disease. I feel like you had a disease from when you were saving them. Um, because I think you had that plague from the rats. So maybe you struggled a little bit longer to actually like get past that. Spent a little bit more time in temple.
Yeah, that works.
Gotcha. So theoretically, that's the type of thing where you're getting cured by like an actual like singular spell, and it's solved. But if you just kind of have like a recurrence, do you imagine this took you like the full 2 weeks, or do you imagine more this was like You got cured, kind of went about your day, felt like shit again, went back, and like it was just the first week, and it was like 2 or 3 days that you spent in the temple just to make sure after that first time. How do you think that would have developed?
Yeah, I think more of the latter, just like maybe a few days, and maybe even taking it, you know, almost using it as like an excuse to kind of just relax and not do anything, like kind of convalescing, and then like even after after a couple of days when he actually feels good, he kind of you know um, nice being kind of waited on and such, so he kind of stretches it out a couple extra days. But I was thinking for the um, I was thinking for like the second week or so. Um, I don't know if this is something he can do like with his downtime, but he essentially wanted to kind of after they had been even if he wasn't there after learning about Fawn and all that kind of that went down, um, essentially trying to spend the week kind of surreptitiously surveilling the shop that she works at, sort of trying to disguise himself maybe as like a beggar, like get some rags and maybe even use some like prestidigitation to kind of give himself a foul stench to kind of keep people away, not too close, and just trying to kind of keep an eye and trying to note like if anyone unusual keeps going back to the store, or, to the shop, or anyone shows up like multiple days, that sort of thing.
All right, excellent. Do you think when you're recovering, do you return to like Darius's chapel? My bad, I switched to the chapel. Saint Gustav's for the priest who is near Delvers Square. Saint Gustav's is um was it Caith? Brother Caith. Saint Darius is Guildsman district. Do you think you went to Brother Mikhail Ambrosov of Saint Darius's chapel in the Guildsman district? Do you think you would go to something like the Sisterhood of Dyra for healing from them, like on that second day? Uh, where do you think you went kind of with this like first one? Do you go to just like generic healers after you've actually had the spell cast on you? And then you let like, it's like almost like going to the ER to go see an actual cleric versus like feeling ill the next day and you're just like, all right, I'm gonna go to like urgent care, go to like a pharmacist. What do you think you did on that first week?
Yeah, so I think because he had been cured once before, when they had actually rescued Fawn, he had come down with, I think, plague, or there was a risk that he had, and so he had gone to that. I think that was St. Gustav's. So I feel like it's at least somewhat of a familiar place. So that would probably be his where he would be going this time as well, since he knows somebody there and they know him, kind of thing.
Roll me D100. If you go to St. Darius's, or my bad, St. Gustav's, and you're being cared for by one of the priests, it's more than likely, actually, likely that the Sisterhood of Silence would do most of the care for you.
Gotcha. Okay. 42 on the D100.
It's a great number, but it is not within the DC of what I was searching for. So yeah, more than anything, um, Brother Fabiator Tisk like checks in on you to see how you're doing. The other priests are there and around, but by and large, you are cared for by a Sister of Silence. And again, they have that name because of their order. Only the eunuchs actually speak. Anything the actual sisters will do is always just in complete silence. So while they care for you inside of the Chapel of St. Gustav's, um, you're don't really pick up anything. That's kind of what I was rolling for to see if you picked up any random information. Let me get another D100 to see how things go while you are kind of like tailing Fawn and basically watching over sessions.
Sure. Do you want me to do a roll as well to see how good my disguise is, or?
Oh yeah, my bad. You can actually, yeah, do a what is that? Probably performance. I feel like performance is probably a good. You could do performance or deception probably to see how well you disguise yourself first, because you have proficiency in disguise kit, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's the same as kind of giving you a charisma with proficiency check.
Yeah, I think I'll do performance just because it's kind of like I feel like deception is more of like a one-off kind of thing, whereas he's trying to essentially keep this up for a few days.
Yeah, I just say each of those just purely because they're both kind of that idea of like whether you're getting into a role or you're lying, they're both kind of that same thing where quite often the best way to lie is to convince yourself that it's a truth.
Gotcha. Yeah, so for performance that would be a 25. Was the nat 20 on the just a skill check, so it doesn't mean anything, but yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah,
25.
solid. That'll lower any sort of DC feeling that I got. So, um, yeah, roll under 60% here, but roll a D100 for me.
Nope, that's a 91.
Gotcha. Yeah. So overall, while you're sitting there watching, everything kind of plays out perfectly normal. Seshez has a constant flux of people who are coming and going. By no means is it like a supremely busy place, but everybody who goes there will tend to be very well dressed, belying some sense of kind of nobility. Those who don't like excrete this kind of like noble aura are essentially delvers, and it's that kind of same kind of thing where delvers are probably looser with their money than a noble is, purely because a delver never knows when they're going to die. So they often have more money to spend than say a noble who hasn't like earned any money for centuries because they just live on the money somebody else made. Um, but that's kind of what you would pick up just kind of watching Seshez is by and large, it's a high end clothier and kind of tailor, but by and large, effectively, um, you're just noticing kind of seems pretty regular kind of customers. Um, Yeah, I think that kind of solves the question that you were looking at. Like, there isn't necessarily anything fishy about what's going on watching it.
Gotcha. Yep. Sounds good.
So, before we jump into today, then, is there anything else that either of you were looking to accomplish before we basically got to today, like this Sunday?
I would also like to spend 15 gold on a forgery kit if I could. I'm not sure if there's any tests necessary. It's from the player's handbook.
Yeah, let me look up real quick how much Delvers get as a discount um, at Everett's Outfitters.
I will
Let me
just tip the difference. 15 gold is perfectly fine for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like it's like a 10 or 20% discount. So it's basically like, one gold 50 cents or one gold 50 silver or 3 gold that you tip Everett. Um it, it just says at least it tells about the discount, but it doesn't say outright on my little cheat sheet I've got here. But yeah, like when you go in there and you're dealing with Everett, um I think Ebert is a little kind of gnome man. He's got a general store basically on like kind of the west end of Delver Square. And yeah, as you're kind of like going through looking over things, you find the kit. Um, he'll question you, see if there's anything else you need. Is there anything else that I can help you with, young lad?
You know what, Ebert? With that sales technique right there, I think you've convinced me. I actually want to get a commission work done. Are you able to do commissions?
Depends what you are looking for. How can I help you? What would you like?
I'm gonna pull out a cigarette and light it, and then I'm gonna pull out my boomerang and put it on the counter, and then I'm gonna pull out my flask and put it on the counter. Oh, actually, two boomerangs. Yeah, but here's the thing: there's a couple things in this world that I love. Drinking and boomerangs are two of them. I want to get boomerang embroidered like gold on the flask, and then I want to get the flask on the boomerang. Does that make sense?
If I recall, you got one of your boomerangs gold filigree.
Yeah, I lost it when I got took by the rat people. Same with my flask too. So I got to get some new custom stuff done. But that last flask wasn't custom. It was just whatever.
I believe I can. I'm not much for weapons. I don't know how it would change the flight characteristics of these items. Is that concerning for you? I know I can engrave the flask for you.
Is the flask any special material? Is it just like steel?
Yeah, it's just a bum flask. Yeah.
There's no problem at all doing that for your flask here. I would wonder about what you would want with the actual boomerangs.
I'm willing to take my chances on you affecting the trajectory or the actual performance of them. I'm not sure if you can look directly at me and tell, but I'm not much of a warrior. I'm more of like an assistant. So, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Just like some gold inlay around here. You could put some little like bigger caps on the ends and everything. I have 10 gold to spend.
If I recall, um, effectively, a boomerang is considered like a javelin. So I think it's pretty cheap. I don't think a flask is terribly expensive. Um, Let me just get a persuasion from you.
I believe is might not require 10 gold. I think I can probably do these modifications for just a few. And if you supply the gold that I require to actually do the inlays with, of course, that isn't necessarily a price I'm charging you, so much as it can save you some of the money that I would require to buy the gold, if that makes sense. I'm not sure how business savvy you are. I'm quite the businessman myself.
All
How
right,
you
so
doing over there?
yeah, I got +6, so 10 total.
Yeah, so I don't know what I randomly said there, but let's just go for like 5 gold. Um, like 3 or 4 gold to do the modification. And he needs like 1 gold to basically um do like a little engraving on, and then basically like softly hammered like nubs on the end. Effectively, it's like gold leafing kind of the outside more than it's like putting like a steel toe on the boomerang, I think.
All right, I'm picking up what you're putting down here, Ebert. And while I know that you are a slick-tongued man and a hell of a salesman, I will not pay over 11 gold. That's where I draw the line, and I'll put 11 gold down on the counter.
Um,
And I'll hold my hand out. Do we have a deal?
what's the normal damage for a boomerang? It's like a D4 or a D6.
D4, yeah.
Yeah, you can do +1 damage with those.
I'd certainly accept the extra tip that you've provided there, young man. There's Well, many thanks. And yeah, he'll like return these to you, kind of like telling you just like come back in like a day or two. And when you come back, you can see like he's used some of the gold to basically like engrave the boomerangs like into the flask, and it looks like you're like juggling the boomerangs. Like it's got like a picture of you, and then it's got a picture of like you like almost like juggling the boomerangs in like a tavern, like one-handed like juggling while you're drinking with like a ale up to your face. And then he's like got that like with gold kind of like inlaid into the actual engraving on the flask. And then the actual boomerangs, each of them has kind of like a little bit of almost kind of like a three-part story of like you kind of like throwing a boomerang, catching a flask, like chugging, and then like the other one is like you catching the boomerang afterwards. And like basically like it's got like a short little story of basically you like throwing a boomerang, chugging a little bit of alcohol, and then like catching the boomerang. But each of them has a little like gold end cap on them, giving them a little bit more damage. You don't know how fast or what that gold will like break off of the boomerang. But effectively, I feel like that's a solid kind of compromise there for the moment. Is that they do a little bit more damage as they are now like steel butted boomerang. Or not steel, gold butted.
You have preserved my legacy forever in these boomerangs, Ebert, and for that I will be forever grateful. +1 damage. Let's go! Alright, I'm good for whatever now.
So theoretically, that brings us up to present. You guys have Mithrenes, who is like keeping watch over um damn NPCs. There's so many people in the city. Mithrenes is watching Gull. Why do I feel like that's not the right name for him? But the vampire guy that you guys were tracking. You've got the goblins like in the goblin house. Um, Theoretically, we're going forward with this idea that you are kind of meeting up every Sunday, to kind of confirm things. Generally speaking, just kind of like meeting up any given day at any given point to make sure that the guild doesn't necessarily require something. Obviously, unless something else comes up. But if we just kind of like assume that you guys are gathering at the Goblin Safe House in the North Market, is there anything that you want to do today, other than kind of like any typical things? Is there anything that either of you has in mind for the day?
I did not have anything specific in mind. Figured since I missed last week, if Jinx or Malshin had any threads I wanted to continue following, that's good for me.
Anything from Jinx?
Well, I think we're gonna want to go. I don't know if you picked up on it or not, Justin, but we basically like sort of figured out or like deducted that likely the father of the child. We thought it was gonna be like the half-orc brother, the one who died. But we kind of got the impression, even though like the manipulation failed, that it's probably the priest. So I think I would like pursue that.
So you know, Brother Fabio Thisk is the priest of St. Gustav's, and that is right across the street from Delver Square. The other temple is the Watcher in the Skies, that there was a priest seen of. You don't know who that priest would be, but you do know that Fawn spends most of her free time at St. Gustav's Chapel, effectively in worship of Lothian, as it is the closest chapel to her home.
And St. Gustav's is where the priest is from too.
That's Fabio Thisk. He is the priest of St. Gustav.
Okay, yeah, that's like Fabier's church, though. That same one? Yeah, that's where we would
Yep,
go.
yep.
And I'm just assuming that it's him. Like, they said he showed up, like, real worried, asking around and everything. So I'm assuming he's the father.
Yeah, and Dalton had picked up when we had rescued Fawn and brought her to St. Gustav's that there seemed to be something unusual about their relationship. Um, but I mean, Dalton's almost thinking like, I think Jinx might be onto something, but he initially had a thought of maybe trying to use that information back when he had kind of had the same suspicion. Um, and I was thinking, I mean, these, brother Fabior's been good to him, um, and he's wondering if maybe this other priest is um, has the same suspicions and is trying to essentially prove it in order to, um, either embarrass him or you know do something to him. So Dalton is would be also curious about discovering the identity of this second priest.
I just want to confirm there. Dalton saved Haljin from the rat folk, and
Oh
he
yeah.
went to the Temple of Darius. And brother Mikhail Ambrosov is the one that you could kind of tell that the two of them had something going on. I
Okay.
don't want to necessarily like pull you away from you're seeing this same pattern in the other two. But I don't believe Dalton is as closely linked to kind of the shadiness of what's going on with Fawn and Fisk.
Yeah. No, you're completely right. I mixed those up. It was it was Kaijin and the other priest. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mixed them up the first time because they're definitely the exact same characters in two different parts of the city. I don't know if you remember, but like when I like played out that storyline, I was like, oh, I'm playing a storyline that I read at one point while going through the book, and I'm pretty sure I know their names, but I have to find them. And I couldn't find their names until like weeks later, until I had like created these characters and we had played like so much with them that I was just like, yep, they're completely different characters at this point. So like Paladin and Ambrosov are me reading front to back Polis and what I picked up about who Fawn and Fisk, um, at least at this point, were. Very meta knowledge there, but that's part of why they might be.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. It's like a familiar story. So I just I forgot it was the different names and such.
That was part of why I was like, yeah, I'm just running with that because I just feel like it's one of those things. There's no reason this wouldn't be a familiar story across like any given temple in any different part of Tolis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, a
So
typical Lothanite. My bad. Go ahead.
oh no, yeah, go ahead. I was gonna ask Jinx something, but I'll ask him after you're done.
All right. I was just gonna say a typical Lothanite temple is pretty much the same, in that they all will have a pretty similar kind of chapel setup here. Um, I think like where with St. Gustav's, it's pointing like our north is pointing to the east. I think St. Darius's is pointing. No, I said that wrong. St. Darius's is pointing to the east. St. Gustav's is pointing to the south. The actual like orientation of the chapel isn't necessarily the same. You always walk into them with the same kind of orientation. So this map that I've previously used for St. Gustav's, St. Darius's works for St. Gustav's. But yeah, go ahead with what you were saying to Jinx.
So yeah, so Dalton was just gonna ask like, um, Is the intention to do you want to try like question um, brother Fabior to kind of confirm your suspicions, or um, and kind of to what end? Like if we do confirm it, kind of what's our game plan here? Like I'll follow your lead, but just trying to get a sense of.
No, no, that's a good point there. I think essentially, well, I consider him an ally. He has no reason to really lie to him other than the protection of his position or, the safety of the child. But at this point in time, they've gotten mixed up in something, and you know, it's beyond the point where either he or we could protect her. So I'd like to offer our services and then kind of go from there, but definitely in a friendly way.
Okay, gotcha. Yes, Dalton would definitely be down with that idea.
But we definitely want to try to get some information because we're trying to figure out at this point in time why the orc guy's brother was killed and who did it. And then we're trying to figure out how all of this is tied with Fawn and the priest and like why the attack happened to begin with and why this like persistent issue is going on. And then still don't have any clue who these people are who are like following me.
Roll a perception for me again, Jinx.
16 total.
You would notice across this past week that the same figure kind of like you're not doing any performances, so you're not like front and center like publicly. But there's definitely times where like you're like walking into Delver Square and you like look over your shoulder and that like same kind of shady figure is like leaned up against the ghostly minstrel and kind of like watching as you like step down underneath the statue um of Runahan, and like as you're walking down into the Undercity, you see that like figure is just kind of like leaned up against the ghostly minstrel, like watching you walk underground. But you probably spot them like 3 or 4 times across this week. That figure is still following you. Still a slender, taller, maybe like 5'10", 6 foot, like two, um, probably male, but effectively you're never seeing their face. The most the light ever catches is just like a little bit under their hood, and it just seems to be darkness.
Hell yeah. I do want to prepare one thing before we go in, actually. I just want to like write like a little note to the priest that I can pass to him.
Gotcha. So you can prepare that. That's no problem at all. You've got plenty of time, like just on your walk from the safe house to Midtown. But let me have you guys roll um, d12s for me.
Do you want us to call him out when we roll something like that?
Yes, yes, preferably.
Okay, 5 for me.
And a 4.
Yeah, the more I play, like getting away from roll 20 where everything's calculated. The more I'd like prefer just to play like it's a home game where like you've got your own like dice tray kind of thing. You're just rolling for yourself. That's part of my preference is like I don't know. The more I play online, the more I care less and less about worrying about whether people are cheating. I just feel like if it becomes evident that somebody's cheating, I have zero interest in playing with them kind of thing.
Yeah, it ruins the narrative if you take the randomness out of it.
Yeah, overall, you guys have a pretty uneventful walk into Midtown. At some point, you guys are kind of like passing through, and there's somebody kind of like pushing their cart around, and it's an older figure, probably about like 60 or so, male human, vastly white hair kind of flowing in the wind, big kind of bushy beard that's like pretty much white as well, and they're just kind of like pushing this cart that's probably like 5 feet long, maybe like 2 or 3 feet wide, and kind of like 6 or so feet tall. And he's just kind of like picking up one side of it, almost like it's a wheelbarrow kind of style, and just kind of like moving forward up the street. And as it goes, he's just meat pies, 9 pennies a piece, meat pies, meat pies.
Oh, my stomach's grumbling. What you thinking?
I'd never say no to a meat pie.
Yeah, if there's one thing I never say no to, it's street meats. Come on, let's get some.
Ah, good day there, gentlemen. Meat pies? What would you care for?
Oh yeah, I think we're after some of your finest street meats. How big are these things? Like what's like a normal serving?
Eh, many fellows are going to eat two, but you could certainly have a good lunch if you just had one. If you were especially famished, I might have a third. And he'll like open up like kind of the top of the case. You see a little bit of like steam come up. And it's almost like a large dumpling, kind of like the size of your kind of palm. It's just like a steamed like kind of like a dough that seems a little bit kinda mushier than it is, like, crunchy.
We could load up on these things and take a little treat down to the church. I mean, we're headed there now. Nobody's ever mad when you bring them lunch.
That sounds like a sure. That sounds like a plan.
How much to buy you out, my friend, and let you go home for the day with a pocket full of coin?
Uh, let's see.
We'd return the cart, of course, when we were finished.
You guys are pretty close to St. Darius's. Um, ah, I believe I've sold about a dozen or so. I think I might have, um and he, like, kinda struggles to count for a little bit, maybe about and, like, you can see as he's, like, getting up to, like, all of his fingers, and he, like, counts all of his fingers, like, 4 times, and then he's like, "I think I've got about 4 dozen remaining." You guys basically watch as he's, like, counting to 40. If you wanted to purchase all of them, um, you said you were taking them to the chapel, what temple were you going to?
Well, if you don't mind following us to Saint Gustav's, set up there, we'll buy you out and maybe let you distribute them if that's
Proper Lothian. Uh, oh, three, 3 gold for the rest of them? Is it 3 silver? Each
Yeah, all
one
right.
basically 1 silver. Yeah, 3 gold I think sounds right. Where he's giving you like 30% off.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Dalton, you doing all right over there?
I can cover this. Uh,
Oh, I got a couple pennies I could throw on it, but I'm a little light. Had a rough week. I've got 7 silver to put in, and then if you could cover the rest.
so that will just wave. I don't know. I'll you can take care of me when you've fattened your purse again a bit, and Dalton will take out 3 gold and kind of put it into the old man's or the cart keeper's hand.
Yeah, so I'm probably even still too quick to like talk about gold. Like he would have basically said something along the lines of kind of saying like 30 silver, or even talking about them still in pennies, but having no clue how to count that high in pennies kind of thing is part of why I converted it to gold. But yeah, I would say like in the long run, he like kind of like struggles to get to a value. Maybe has the two of you actually like kind of helping him. And there's like a few moments where he like wonders about things, hears about Lothian, and it's like, oh, awesome, awesome. This is all good news. And he's just kind of like getting there on the math. But when you actually hand him 3 gold pieces, like his eyes are gonna like pop up real big smile, and like the first thing he does is he bites into one of these lions, and he's just like, "Oh, a, a real lion." And you see as he like almost kind of like chews on it, like puts like 5 or 10 little like tooth marks into this lion that you've given him. And very like kind of like pep in his step almost, like turns around the cart and starts to follow you guys along the road. There's and you guys can have like the first one. It's something like a nice kind of like lamb. Not necessarily unspiced, but I would say like think of just kind of like steamed dumpling, kind of like where it's just dough wrapped around a little bit of like lamb flank, and there's a little bit of like say something like thyme and like rosemary kind of like inside of there, so it has like a nice little kind of like spice to it, but it's otherwise a very very simple, like very tender, simply meat wrapped around a little bit of dough. You've got kind of like sugar in those proteins there. Um, Very lean as far as fat goes. I'm pretty sure that is.
And that's right. That's right. Glad we ran into you today. No doubt it was Lothian planned the whole thing. Hail to him. And I'll like look up, and then I'll say, and remember, it's Dalton and Jinx, famous delvers known across the land.
Pleasure to meet you, Dalton. And he goes to like reach over his hand to Jinx. And Jinx, uh, my name's Billy. Good Lord, Billy the goat sales.
The pleasure's all of mine, Billy. I'm glad we met you today. In case you haven't noticed yet, I'm slowly spreading our names around to make us famous. I figure if we just keep giving gold to all the poor people, like eventually our names will like pass and they'll be like, oh, that's them, that's them.
Oh, that's definitely how a lot of Delvers go about their business here. There's many, many folk who've made themselves famous by caring for us no more folk. It's mighty appreciated, and it's one of the few uh, comforting things about whatever lies beneath the city here is to know that there are good folk like you who do everything they can to take care of us no more folk. I bet I think I just was speaking without pressing down push to talk. You guys can continue up the street with him, along like Center Streets as you're heading towards Delvers Square. When you look up into the sky, let me have you each roll a perception check. Or I guess realistically, let me ask Dalton. When Jinx kind of says like praise Lothian and looks up into the sky, do you do anything to like react to this? Or are you kind of still like agnostically, atheistically like,
I think Dalton kind of he'd give a little kind of like kind of a perfunctory like kind of raise his head, but he wouldn't really be kind of really looking up, just kind of following the motion. Um,
gotcha. So let me get a perception from you, but a disadvantage. And Jinx, what is that? An 11 from you?
6.
Sixer? All right. What's that from Dalton?
that would be an 8. Oh no, a
Oh, of course it is. It's a 17 and a 1.
yeah, it's like stuck between the 13 and the 1. The
Oh,
breakdown
you called
shows
it
it
as
as a
a 13
13.
though. Yeah, yeah. Let's go with that. So that's still pretty
So
much
it's
crushing it.
yeah, so 17 then total. Sorry.
So as you look up into the sky, every once in a while you've seen some of the like hot air balloon tours that kind of like go around the city. You just look up into the sky and you're going to kind of like spot one of these hot air balloons. And as you're just kind of like, I don't know, like randomly, like of course you look up and you see a little bit of like kind of tourism over the city as somebody gives one of these tours, and you just notice middle of the day, early morning, kind of middle of the day, high sun, there is a massive white star shining overhead. I don't know if Dalton has a reason to recognize like what a comet is, but effectively you're like randomly looking up and there's a new kind of like sun in the sky type of thing. And you just see this massive white star with a long blue and purple tail that kind of covers, say like, you put up your like thumb to it and like you could cover most of the tail with your thumb kind of thing with your outstretched arm. um but type of thing, like if he knew more about what it was, it's pretty cool to look up and see a comet. But more than likely it's pretty astonishing to look up and see something new in the sky.
Yeah, I don't think Dalton would have any particular reason to know what a comet is. So he'd like do the kind of like the perfunctory kind of like raising his head, and then kind of like he would like see it, but like not realize it. So he'd bring his head back down, and then kind of like look up like very quickly a second time, more like with more interest. And
Do you have religion or nature proficiency? I don't think
no,
that's you
nope.
in either of those. You've got history though. Roll me a history check.
So that would be a 14.
You're not entirely sure what something about this like means in the long run. Um what like that is like as far as the natural world goes, as far as like people who look at it religiously. You look up there though, and there's something in like kind of the back of your mind that just kind of like reminds you of like one of those little like children's stories that you're kind of told, and you can't think of exactly why, but this thing makes you think of the story of the Valus moon. And it's the second moon that should be circling in orbit around your planet that you guys live on. But the Valus moon is not something that you've ever seen. It's not something that anybody who's alive has ever seen. The Valus moon, as far as you know, is simply just a story of myth. But looking up at that little star in the sky, just think for a moment about the Valus moon. And for now, that's all. It just kind of comes to mind like a little story that you heard long time ago about the Valus moon, something about its imminent return. But that's kind of it.
Yeah, so Dalton will kind of that comes to mind, but he's almost like that can't be it. And he'll kind of like he's saying kind of saying this in his mind, and just maybe give like when he brings his head back down, give a little kind of shake of his head, and maybe like turn to Jinx to maybe mention something, but then um decide to maybe wait and imagine this is the kind of thing that lots of people will be superstitious about. So he doesn't want to. For now, he's just going to kind of put it to the side.
So Billy continues to kind of like chat up about like the like cooking preparations of his little thing, his little that now I can't think of the dumplings, um, his meat pies. You guys make your way to the Temple of Gustav's across the way from the Delver Square. Um, there's times where he like goes to say meat pie before he like recognizes like, oh, he's not even like working at this point. He just needs to help you guys like hand these out, and then he's on his way. But you guys can arrive at the chapel there. Are you looking to hand them out on the street? Are you looking to like go inside and specifically look for people inside of the temple? What sort of thoughts about dispersing these you guys have?
Oh yeah, if we could muster up a decent way to like just carry them hot inside and just kind of give them to all the people there. That's kind of what I was thinking.
So if you head inside, there's not really a way in particular for him to bring the actual cart in. But like he could basically kind of like set you guys up with I don't know, let's not say he's got parchment paper, but something kind of along the lines of some of the gazetteers that he can like hand out like old newspaper, kind of like fish and chip style of thing, where he just like takes some of the gazetteers, wraps them around, and he'll just basically sit outside and start to wrap these up. So you've got like almost like little hot pocket kind of things, and he can just start setting up like you want him to wrap like two to a package. You want him to do them like singly. Do you have thoughts on that?
Not really. I'm okay with whatever. He can do them however he wants to. However he would like normally hand them out, whatever. I mean, I'm sure we can kind of get people to walk from like the front steps down to like get free lunch.
Gotcha. So you guys can head on inside. You can tell him, he'll start wrapping up like a couple, like two at a time. He'll wrap up a couple one at a time, and he just kind of like varies on that, where he's just kind of wrapping them up and kind of keeping a few different stacks. Um, he's probably not going to do any three at a time unless you specifically ask for them. So he doesn't necessarily like create like a waste. But basically, you guys can like set him off with that. You could perhaps like head inside with a few already in hand, if you would like. But when you head into the actual temple, you are very quickly going to see Brother Februar Thisk. I believe everybody has met him already. At very least, I think everybody's spoken with him, or has heard the conversation because um, he's basically one of the most recognizable priests simply from being across the street in Delver Square, as well as like you guys are close to Fawn, and if she's not at work, she's probably here. If she's not here, she's probably sleeping at home, kind of thing. But you do walk in, and you will very quickly see that Brother Fabio Thisk, as well as um, Fawn Quartermain, are inside of the temple. Fawn is basically like in prayer next to the kind of like central dais, and Brother Fabio Thisk is, let's see, this moment. Yeah, central dais kind of in the middle of like a silent prayer. But basically like the chapel is kind of silent as you walk in on these two.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and approach uh and meats in hand. And is this like the type of thing where you're supposed to be like whispering, or is it like okay to talk regular here?
It's holy ground, so it's not necessarily a bad idea to have some sense of decorum. But you guys have had normal conversations inside of the actual chapels. I think by now you would vaguely understand that one of these unknown corners is like priest quarters. One of these unknown quarters is like the Holy of Holies, and one of these unknown quarters is um, I don't know, vaguely something else. But you basically understand like the holiest of these places is not necessarily like the central area where you are, but you're still in a holy building.
All right, well, I'm going to say loudly in a whisper. Lothian has blessed us all with hot, doughy, sweet meat treats. There's a bunch out front. Everyone, come help yourselves. We've brought lunch. And I'll like hand one to, what's his name? Thaddeus? How do you say?
What is it, Fabiador Thisk?
Fabiador? I'm going to hand one to Fisk.
Yeah. Brother Fab It or and then Thisk. Fabitor. So yeah, you kind of like walk in. Babador will actually turn. Brother Thesk will kind of like turn as you kind of enter. Um Bon might like kind of like show like a sign of like hearing something. But she doesn't actually like stand up. She's still like kneeled down in prayer and hands up to her face. Head otherwise remains kind of ducked. And Febador will kind of like turn to you with a little bit of a bow. Um Hello. Um let's go for it. He already knows your name. He kind of like turns to you. Hello, Dalton and Jinx. It's a pleasure to see you today. Thank you very much. I was preparing to break fast. What what brings you here today? What generosity has you bringing us all these wonderful treats? And I assume he'll take one from you to like kind of unwrap the little dumpling and take a bite and
All right, when I hand it to him, I'm going to sleight of hand and slide him the note.
gotcha. Is this for him to not notice? Or is it for others to not notice and him to recognize?
On
Nobody to notice?
no, just for like other people not to notice, but I'm like sliding it to him like, like the like gangsta trade.
Gotcha. Is Dalton unaware that you've written this note?
Oh no, Dalton's cool. It's more just for like randos.
All right. So essentially in this moment, it's realistically for Fawn not to notice, and she's not really paying attention. So um yeah, I mean effectively you could sleight of hand and I believe you're gonna automatically accomplish this, but
Yeah, I
so
did get a 7, but yeah.
so yeah, like as he's like um unwrapping uh the meat pie, you see his like Fawn's eyes kind of open up and she like looks over right as Fabior notices that there's like the note in his hand. And she like looks directly at the note as he's like recognizing what's going on. She's theoretically like still 5 or 10 feet away from you guys. But like right away, like the way it like plays out, like the smell of the meat pie or whatever it is. On some level, she recognizes the note.
That's awesome.
I rolled with disadvantage and I beat you, but of course you also rolled too. So
Well, I don't know. Is he just gonna like look at the note now, or is he gonna hang on to it?
Let's see. He kind of like is like looking at you, and like this is again kind of where you'll notice like Fawn like looking up and seeing it. He kind of like goes to like open the meat pie, notices that you've handed him something else, and he like looks to you with like an eye of curiosity. And he's basically implying without saying anything like, "Should I read this now?"
Yeah, yeah. Read it now. Yeah.
Okay. So what's inside of the note?
Okay. It just says, "We know what you did last summer. Very nice. Your secret's safe with us. We know you're fond of each other. Wink, wink." And then that's it.
So we know what you did last summer. We know that you're fond of each other, and it's like wink, wink, good job.
Yeah, yeah. Like basically, like we're not gonna like tell anybody or anything, but like we know what's going on.
Does the note actually say like wink, wink?
Yeah, I don't think they have winky faces. Maybe in this universe, I'm not sure if emojis exist.
I totally wrote down the wink, wink in my notes, like inside of the quotation. So yeah, he's gonna kind of like read over the note for a moment. You see him like look over towards Fawn, and he like vehemently shakes his head no, like just back and forth, like no, no.
I don't suppose there's somewhere private we could talk. I'm not sure how it works in these type of places.
Um, all things are known to Lothian. There's not typically areas where I would attempt to keep any sort of secret. Um, and you see as he kind of like looks over, like to his left, to your right, and he like there's just like a large kind of like blue like tapestry that like covers that whole wall. My bad, I should actually express as well, like this place seems generally square, but there are basically three tapestries that cover like three of the walls, to the right, to your left, and straight ahead of you. They're just like massive like curtains basically. And he'll like walk you over into kind of the east portion of this chapel. Again, technically our east is west because it's, but I'm not readjusting this every time I have to use this chapel because it is so generic.
Can I
Uh,
insight check him when he says that?
of course, roll an insight check. And this is when he's nodding or when he's saying all things are kind of like seen by Lothian. What are you trying to see through?
Oh, I got a 4, so nothing, nothing at all. I was trying to see basically, did I like, is he lying to us, or do I feel like he knows what we're talking about?
So I imagine this space is a lot more crowded than what like I've kind of added to this. But he will bring you into a small little room behind one of these tapestries. The actual door to it is locked. Um, Trying to think if clerics have access to like an unlocking spell where he could almost like walk up to the door and like open it with magic. But he basically kind of like, I'm gonna say he does it anyways. Where he basically like walks up to to the tapestry, kind of does like a blessing to Lothian, and then he'll like open the door. But you'll see him actually manipulate the weave with holy magic before he like reaches through the tapestry to open that door. You'll see on the other side, he's got a bed. He's got like a small bookcase. There is a very austere, like writing desk with a very simple bench. Um, Probably some pretty simple, like not necessarily like um dresser or anything. He probably pretty much has like two sets of robes, like a very holy set that are for specific rituals, and then a typical days like robes. But otherwise, you can kind of see like austerity in everything that like kind of is like evident here. But he brings you into this room, and he kind of like looks around for a moment, and there's like the small bench at the writing desk, and he's just kind of like looks around. And he's like, my apologies. I don't really have a place to offer you a seat as the decorum in private discussions, but we are only in Lothian. I assure you, Van and I have no business together. We are not involved. I am a holy man, and I've made my vows to Lothian, care for his flock. But Van, go ahead. What do you think?
Oh, my bad. Oh, we're not trying to make any accusations. We're not planning on causing any problems or anything like that. But, well, obviously, Fawn is in danger. And I don't know if she told you, but I already tried to get some answers out of her.
She has many troubles, as we've discussed with some of your order in the past when you first rescued her. That was much of why I thanked you all then, is because she is such a dedicated servant of Lothian. She is certainly on a path near that of the holiest of sisters, but she lives also a very traditional life of the flesh as well. But it is I believe you have misunderstood our involvement together.
I mean, you must at least know them. If it's not you, who is it? And I'm going to try to do a persuasion, 14 total.
So he kind of like steps up to the wall, almost like next to his bed, almost giving you like the sense like if there weren't a wall in like that tapestry in front of him, as if he was like staring at Fawn, like still in prayer, and effectively like looking into this wall as he kind of answers here. I have understood for some time now. She does have a lover. I know that she finds it perhaps dangerous or offensive to discuss such things. I knew this when you first saved her. I understand now you put more pressure, recognizing that she has child within.
I mean, we're concerned for her safety. She's obviously wrapped up in something and can't figure out why anyone would be after her. Young, sweet woman, hardworking. Everyone speaks highly of her, but she was almost killed. And if it has nothing to do with her, it's because of the father. So someone knows other than, well, you two. And honestly, we thought we had put two and two together here, but initially we suspected that it was the half orc that was the father of the child, and that's what had happened here. And I'll mention Griggs.
Wait, who are you mentioning?
Damn it! I think I said the wrong name. The orc that got killed.
Cran, Torian Cran.
Yeah, Krang. Wait, is that it? Krang?
Cran. I saw the fire of when this Cran passed. I don't understand the connection, but I was pleased to find whatever did happen seemed to solve at least part of her problems. Was when you all found her, you all, I believe you guys killed two guys when you found her attacked in the alley. But basically he like kind of like follows with like whatever business you were able to accomplish when you first saved her. Something about those fires uh, burned away much of the urgency. It seemed until recently that she was safe. I do know of late she's been noticing she's been followed and she's been questioned after larger figures, but I believe the other women at Seshes are aware enough to recognize she's in danger. Very few will give up her information to those they don't already trust. It seems to have quelled many of the issues, but isn't this all you're doing? You've been protecting her.
We've been doing what we could, keeping an eye out from her, but trying to get to the bottom of the situation. I understand if you don't want to tell us, you don't have to. I'm not gonna sit here. I can't force you. And honestly, if what you say is true and the problems are solved, then maybe there's nothing to worry about. I just find it odd that we are the ones that are worried about her safety.
I Please don't think that I don't care for her danger. Whatever it was that's brought those criminals to even know of her seems to have been a great problem that could have cost her life. No doubt, whatever was happening in that alley, it was someone was trying to harm her. Someone went after that criminal Cran. I just, I don't have all of the information. And he kind of like just looks up towards the sky as he like turns back around to you all. Lothian has not shared what I would request of her. I cannot force her to tell me what she cares not.
I mean, I think that's fair enough. If she doesn't want to share anything with us or whatever, um, Obviously doesn't have to.
Any thoughts from Dalton?
Well, Jinx, I'm sure the good brother here is doing what he can. Perhaps we should take a more active approach. Perhaps we could turn our investigations towards finding out who might have wanted Cran dead. Maybe perhaps if this has something to do with him, we need to focus our attentions on that angle.
I don't think that's a bad plan at all. At all. We do have maybe one more stop to make. Um, they told us that you had come back concerned after the fire, and there was another as well, a priest that was seen there. Maybe he knows something. And we'll mention that we're going to like see the other priest next. See if that like gets a rise out of him or anything.
Do you share like what religion effectively he is, like Watcher in the Skies?
Yeah, yeah, I will. I'll share. What that's the name of the temple. That's like the equivalence of like worshiping Lothian, but like a different.
Yeah, like effectively the Watcher of the Skies is one of the religions kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, yeah, we'll share that.
It's intriguing, to say the least. But a priest of the Watcher of the Skies would have to do with Torian Cran. I It's quite perplexing, to say the least, but perhaps that is the information that you seek. Perhaps their priest is her lover, her secret father.
Speaking of watching the skies, brother, haven't you noticed anything unusual up there recently? I could have sworn I saw, but and then he'll kind of just trail off. It's still not kind of sure if he is just like seeing things or but he's thinking of the Valus and kind of Valus moon, so he just wants to kind of put that question out there.
Jinx is like gonna give him a weird look because he just assumes this is like a weird angle that he doesn't understand because there's no possible way that he didn't notice this.
Brother This kind of like looks at you. I am not aware of any changes in our surrounding of anything of interest. Why do you ask? And as you kind of like trail off, he just kind of like sees like unless that actually does provoke you to something else, he just kind of like allows you to kind of like wander off in thought.
Yeah, so Dalton will be kind of like he like kind of head down, kind of after he like kind of trails off, and then kind of look back up and he'll like start to open his mouth and then close it and be like, I'm sure it's I'm sure I'm mistaken. Don't worry about it. Um, yeah, he's gonna just kind of leave it at that. He's kind of thinking like Dalton said. He's thinking like if I say like I saw, this is what I saw, and like he's thinking like people are just gonna like think I'm nuts. I'm going nuts. So he's being very leery about actually kind of putting it out there. So it's like somebody who's like saying like they spotted a UFO kind of thing is the kind of thought process.
Gotcha. So yeah, you guys can head out of here with Brother Fisk. As he kind of like brings you out of the room, he'll turn and you'll see as once again he kind of like blesses that door, kind of returning it to a locked state kind of thing. And when you step out, before he actually recognizes anything, you'll see that Fawn isn't actually there. But within a few moments, she'll like walk in with one of these goat meat pies. And she's like having a bite to eat as you guys all step out of the side office. Do you have any thoughts while you are still at St. Gustav's?
So Dalton, when he steps out and sees Fawn, he's going to give kind of like a big smile and a wave, essentially trying to give the impression that whatever they were talking about, like it had nothing to do with her, kind of thing. It was like overly kind of like friendly kind of wave, and but other than that, he'll say something like, I was just about to bring see if you wanted something to eat, but I see you've found you found Billy, a new friend. We're just Jinx and I were just headed out.
iPhone.
Yeah, she'll say her hellos to you, kind of like enjoying like little nibbles of the dumpling. But yeah, if you guys don't have any questions or anything for her, she just kind of like, um, I don't know, kind of almost in like a like meek kind of awkwardness of where things kind of left off with Jinx and her. She just kind of like lets you guys go, but it's just kind of like almost like just kind of nods.
Yeah, I'm not gonna push it. I feel like Jinx is already like feeling super guilty and like scummy for like trying to influence people.
Does that mean that we will be taking ourselves to the Temple District? Are you looking to go find this Watcher of the Skies?
When we go back outside, can I test again to see if I notice this time?
Oh yeah, since he brought it up, when you look up into the sky, you will 100% see this comet.
Okay, sick. So yeah, I think we would probably converse a little bit, be a little enamored at what the hell's going on here, and then I think if ever there was a time that we need to go to the Temple of the Watcher of the Skies, I would think it's while there's a giant like meteorite, asteroid, whatever, right above us that just suddenly appeared.
Can I have the two of you make perception checks?
19.
21.
So each of you notice as Billy is like wrapping up the last of these gazetteers like around these little meat pies. He's like back to almost like the last page of his newspapers, and he has to like tear it in half to be able to wrap like the last two of these dumplings. And as he's tearing off like the last chunk of this, you see that there is a picture of this meteor or of this comet in the sky, and it says, "Children of the Veilless Moon, murdered in the night." And that is the front page of the Gazetteer from yesterday.
I'm like duck down and get close to it. I'm like reading between his fingers while he's doing this. I'm like, dear God, I'm out of touch.
It feels actually a bit relieved that maybe I was the only one who was seeing it, that I might be going crazy.
Wait, you mean you noticed that already and didn't say anything?
Well, I mean, the veil as the moon is not exactly something you expect to see appearing in the sky. I didn't want to, just in case I was going crazy, I didn't want to drag anyone down with me.
I suppose that's fair enough. I'm not sure which of us is more awkward. You thinking it was a hallucination or me not even noticing? Well, we'll head down to the temple and perhaps we can get some kind of answers, if not about her and what's going on, at least about what the hell this thing is.
We should.
Both of you are. My bad. What are you thinking, Justin?
Dalton was going to suggest that we should also see if we can like find ourselves a copy of like yesterday's paper, so that we can have just like at some point read the article itself and see if it mentions like any like where these murders took place or any kind of more details.
I have not actually prepared the printing press per se. But you guys could definitely rescue the 2 pages, like the page that's been torn in half, and just basically either keep Billy from handing out these two, or simply, like take the dumplings that are in them and keep the newspaper. But you can at very least do that and have the front page. But I want you to. This is where I just feel like the luck from Call of Cthulhu is so useful. Let me have you roll. Um, yeah, you guys are right outside of the Delver Square. Let me have you guys roll a perception check here.
10.
Solid 20. Is that 20 from right here, Jinx?
Yeah, nat 20 for 22 total.
Yeah. So you see one of the little crier boys, like 5 or 6 years old, kind of like has like a pile of papers, a pile of gazetteers, like tucked under his armpits. And he's like yelling out, um, like gazetteer, like five, 5 pennies, gazetteer, 5 pennies, and he's just like crying out for people to buy what you can expect would be today's paper.
Here, we'll take one right here, my man. I'll hold up a silver and give it to him when he comes back.
Yeah, so when you go to hand him a silver, he's gonna hand you 2 papers.
Appreciate that. And I'll hand one over.
Yeah, Dalton will take it. He's gonna turn to the kid. You don't happen to have any leftovers from yesterday? I missed my daily pickup.
Uh, Roll a D100 for me.
7.
I don't keep the old ones, but I pick up my papers, uh, right around the corner here. If you want to follow me, right down, Tavern Row, and we could see. We usually turn them back in, get some of our money back, and they might have one still. And he'll kind of just like run you around the corner, down like Tavern Row, And let's just say he takes you down like Estanther Street, and there's just like a small booth. Like it's not actually like a shop, but it's basically just like a roll top or like a roll, yeah, like a roll open like storage unit kind of thing. And he can like unlock the gates and kind of like look in and yep, steal some right back here, and he'll like climb over like some of the papers that you can see are like today's papers. And he's like in the back, he'll grab one of the like old copies, and he'll just like kind of like hand it out to you. And like when you go to touch the paper, he's holding like, he's 5 or 6 years old, so he's not holding a rock solid grip on it. But what's it to you, sir?
Well, I'd say one day's news is just as good as another, and he'll take out 5 coppers uh, and then he'll kind of like he'll look at it and then maybe pull out a couple more, so like an extra 2, and uh, for your trouble, appreciate it, and he'll hold out the 7 coppers and try to see if that's enough for the kid.
Gotcha. Yeah, you had him at the 5 coppers, and he's already like, "Oh, awfully kind of you, sir." And then you like pull out 2 more pennies, and you see he like now feels like he like took the world. Let me get an intelligence from each of you. But I wonder if I don't know if Jinx has anything better than just saying intelligence from you. I'm tempted to say with history from Dalton. Do you have any intelligence proficiencies with Jinx? Like nature, religion, history?
No, just like the half
Uh,
proficiency
how
thing.
about investigation? Yeah, you've got investigation. Go for investigation.
And this is going to be a 9 for my check.
Okay, mine's dirty 20.
All right, a 9 and a dirty 20. 9 is the history. Um, Yeah, so you guys can see like there's almost the same article printed in each paper for each day. The titles are a little bit different one day to the other. Yesterday it was Children of the Veiless Moon murdered. Today it's Murdered Children of the Comet. And you basically can see like kind of going through it, recognize like a few different things. Like Bayless Moon's kind of thrown in there as like you can almost like recognize pretty quickly this is like a tabloid style of throw that word in there and there's a certain amount of like conspiracy people who are going to jump on it. It's just kind of like a high SEO word. It's a good catch all of people's attention are going to gravitate towards seeing that word. Um, but you do see each of these articles is otherwise pretty much the same in that it basically outlines that on the first day that this comet was seen, 3 children across the city were murdered. And part of what the article talks about is the recognition that 5 children were born that day, and 2 of them have basically now gone into hiding as as like the city guard is now like protecting these kids because they're worried that the other 2 are going to get killed. And it kind of just goes into sort of that thought. Do you guys have any other questions about what you might pick up inside of it?
I think that'd be kind of enough for Dalton. He just kind of wanted to get a sense of um, yeah, that's good, and he might look to Jinx and um, well, it doesn't say anything about any unborn children, but makes you wonder. Then I'll kind of glance back towards towards in the direction of the church they just left. But then he'll kind of like, yeah, there you go, conspiracies again. Now let's go find that this priest. Um, and he'll kind of like tuck the paper, fold it back up and kind of tuck it away.
I'm no doctor, but I don't think she was that far along. I mean, it was noticeable, but she doesn't look like she's about ready to pop or anything.
You said you had a dirty 20 on that, Jinx?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think it's kind of a stretch because it was before you started playing, and I'd like to keep that at least a little bit to reward that, like, it's still a 20. That's still a pretty impossible setting, even in tier 1 here, like at the latter ends of tier 1. But part of Malchin's story started off searching after the uh marked children, and in particular, Kalimtas was given an order, and in particular it was for Malchin to go after and to kill some children. They kind of denied the overall order to do so, and that's actually part of how Malchin's story started going after some of the slavers in the city. Was going after these marked children. When you're going through the paper, you recognize that one of the like ways the story kind of talks about some of these children is basically calling them rune bearers, and it basically talks about them having birthmarks, almost tattoos of the runes from the sky. But you can kind of connect the dot here, kind of recognizing um, something about where Malchin's been, something about where your own guild has been, is that these children are born regularly. There's signs from above, but there's also signs physically in their flesh.
Okay, so I would share that obviously with Dalton. So maybe it's not about when the child's born, but rather if they're marked. So I don't know. It just seems rather coincidental. This and then obviously her being with child. Maybe it's just that though. I don't know.
Yes, there's no way to know. Could be someone misinterpreting some or thinking they're seeing some sign, or who knows. But for now, I think you're planning to go see if we can track down this other priest. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, and we'll get up with Malchin later on and see if he can fill in some of the blanks on this.
So when you all walk into the temple district, um, you've got the Street of a Million Gods that kind of leads like north to south. Most often, you've crossed over on the bridge on the south end of that. That is where you found the rat temple over near where it says 153 here. Um, but you're basically looking for the Temple of the Watcher in the Skies. Can I get you to do a religion check or a survival to see if you know where this particular temple is?
14 for me.
I feel like that's solid enough, let alone that Jinx's is probably going to be higher. So when you guys kind of like are heading off here, two of you being vaguely natives of the area, you've got a pretty solid recognition or like recollection that there is a massive temple that actually has a incredibly large telescope that is pointing off into the sky. And while neither of you has never necessarily had any reason to
go there to talk to anybody who like believes in this religion. You have a pretty solid sense that this is probably something to do with a watcher in the sky, as there's a massive telescope that's pointing up towards the sky. On this map here, it is 142, just about in the center, and you're basically just walking up to the north side of the temple district along the Street of a Million Gods. When you approach this temple, you will approach from the street, but your view of the actual like skyline is of this massive structure to the west, like kind of in the central area, and you can see this great big dome, and there's this great big oculus that kind of stares up towards the sky. And you guys kind of approach from the east. There's two different entrances. Um, I don't think there's any reason to say that you would go in one versus the other because it's basically a northeast and a southeast. But they're both kind of like leading towards the same way. But you guys can like enter in through. I don't really have this set up to be hidden from you at all. But you guys can basically like head on in through um yeah, it looks like the north side is the main entrance. The south side like heads you into that meditation room. But basically, like the temple is effective observatory. Uh, um, the actual Oculus, the telescope, is trained up and basically looking at this comet. There's quite a few um, robed folk who are kind of like at the actual Oculus, like looking over. Um, it's kind of a bus, kind of a like bustling place at this point, as you're basically walking into this like with the full recognition, like everybody in the city is starting to come to terms with the fact that there's something new in the skies above. Unless you guys like accidentally like bumped into the meditation room, which I think is perfectly fine. You basically have that the temple entered through the north. Oh, that was the wrong. Temple is entered through the north. It kind of has like a bunch of like normal like lay folk as well as actual priests kind of like actively about. But most of it would be around the actual observatory where you can walk in and see like this wooden and like steel structure that basically holds up this large telescope, and you can kind of see like the I feel like you would almost have a sense like where the rotunda above and the like temple center are like on a big almost like lazy susan where it's like geared so the whole thing like can kind of like turn around, and there's like scaffolding that like leads up and supports the roof. It would probably be a very out of place kind of feeling of like technology inside of a world where engineering doesn't have to be this like far ahead kind of thing. It'd be a pretty cool place to walk into, even like going to like a NASA observatory now is. They're it's at least in my opinion, they're very cool places to go to. But yeah, what kind of thoughts do you all have as you enter the Temple of the Watcher of the Skies?
This place is a little overwhelming, Dalton, but if there's one thing I can say for sure, it's that we are not leaving here until I peer out of that thing.
Yeah, I don't know the rules on that, but worth asking.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna start walking up to like the people that are viewing out of it. I think you said there was like some robed people, and I'm just gonna start like being friendly and asking about it.
Yeah, there's like 8 individuals up there. 3 of them are women, 5 males. There's an older man who's like actually at the telescope right now. Um, Yeah, like if you just start kind of like joining in and just kind of like chatting with people, you know, let's roll it all. One of the guys kind of like turns to you and, oh yeah, we're watching the new comet that appeared above. It's quite quite exciting and like very dry, like geeky, exciting for somebody who's not showing like any emotion.
That's quite exciting indeed. I was a little late to the party, but I would imagine that that big thing makes it a lot better to see. Is there like an order? Can I get up in this?
The high priest has been watching for some time now. I'm not sure if um, are you a student or a watcher of the skies? I don't recognize.
Um, no, not particularly. Just an interested party. I'm not affiliated with any particular religion, nor do I know the rules of them. Just honestly, sort of discovering this little branch of our beautiful city. Just out of curiosity, is this like a as been foretold type moment? Is this like the culmination of your religion, what you've been waiting for? And if so, what are we expecting here?
It depends if you like to look at things as um, joyous moments or those that herald doom. How this is seen. It speaks wonders for the change that comes about in societies as long-standing monoliths of culture collapse underneath the weight of their own decay, and new things rise.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, I suppose doom or joy would depend on one's vantage point. As children, for example, I'm sure there that they weren't seem to have gotten the uh, short end of the stick. This sudden arrival, and he'll try to say it kind of nonchalantly, but he's trying to kind of see if there's any sort of reaction from the fellow when he mentions the children that were have been killed.
You guys are like kind of whispering in the back, or are you just kind of like saying these like just kind of normally? What are you thinking here about like your volume?
I think Dalton is probably he's speaking more kind of like as an aside, so he's speaking fairly quietly.
Yeah, I
Kind
think
of,
I would be respectful of like the once they had said it's like the high priest. I'm like not going to be like obnoxious.
A night of dissolution. It's perhaps something that we should all worry about and mayhaps grieve those who would be lost. It's most unfortunate that children must be those who bear this emissary, this portent of change. But we are all children of the gods. We must all die some day. If it is our fate to go young, that's not similar to those die old. It's our fate. They are bearers of great change, and the many will benefit from the collapse of this empire.
Now, arguably, and obviously I'm not for the sacrifice of children normally without purpose, but if we're all about to get wiped out anyway, I mean, I could understand how you sort of just brush that under the rug.
The, the children are the gatekeepers of change. It's not my place to say whether they should or should not do such a thing. They are. It is a fact. I there are those. And you hear as like the old man like sitting at the um actual telescope. The rune bearers are born into their position. Whether this will bring about the night of dissolution or their injury, prevent it. None can see from the signs above. The signs point to change, but what change? We do not recognize. And you can kind of see, like, on some level, he's like almost like chastising, um, and he just like says, Hasmius. So like this old man like is kind of like responding to the kid who is talking to you all, or maybe like not necessarily kid, but like the young priest. I
So
am
Dalton will.
sorry, Master Ilsenstein. I I was trying to inform them. Yeah. And then what were you thinking?
Sorry, so Dalton will he'll almost kind of like pat the younger priest like on the shoulder, almost like kind of like a sorry for getting you in hot water kind of motion, and then he'll looking towards the older man actually at the telescope. He'll as he kind of says this, he'll nod and well, that is why we watch, is it not? For these signs of change, but the actual what's actually been done. That is the work of us down here, is it not?
Um, so the old man like never actually like looks away from the actual telescope as he like prepares to and also responds to you, but he's just kind of is indeed our way to see things above and act in accordance to our own mixed and failing predisposition. Softly human of us, but only a criminal does such horrendous things. Those you speak. Skies warn us of our fate, but we enact them. And this might be the moment where you see like the littlest bit of his attention kind of like pulls away as he like looks away and kind of like looks up towards the two of you who've kind of like entered into this like little like huddle of his priests.
This is all absolutely fascinating, and we appreciate y'all taking us in and informing, spreading the word. Definitely interesting. Now, would we have like heard of this before? I guess growing up in the city, and now it sort of feels like a we were right moment as it's playing out.
I would say you probably have a similar chance of having been told, like stories of the Valus Moon being lost. Um, these are kind of the things where, like, I don't know. Did I give you a chance to recognize the Valus Moon and you rolled too low? I feel like yes. So maybe you were never told the story inside of the orphanage of the Dyra Moon or the Sisterhood of the Dyra. Um, Let me get a religion from both of you on whether you had heard of the Night of Dissolution.
As far as like from like the little that Dalton remembers from his like the stories about the moon itself, he would have probably like related that story to Jinx on our walk down the street of the million gods towards the temple.
Yeah. You guys can 100% have shared like what you heard today. But yeah, this is kind of the type of thing is like, I live in a game where you can throw vampires at me. Has anybody ever told me about vampires? Versus like, just not having heard of it.
Right. Yeah. It'd be a 17 for me for the religion check.
Jinx is 14.
Night of Dissolution, I think it's probably close enough for each of you to have a pretty similar understanding. Most of what that tends to talk about is uh almost kind of like Ragnarok, kind of like end of the world type of things. This way of describing it, and part of what I'm trying to allude to and how they were speaking of it, is more in kind of a death creates new life. Like when something dies, there's almost always new life that takes it over. Um, Part of the idea of actually, let me get an insight check from both of you here as I'm kind of describing this. But the Night of Dissolution tends to be an end of the world kind of thing. You wouldn't necessarily think of this as something that you should look forward to because it's the destruction of everything. It's a Ragnarok or um, think of the final book of the Bible, redemption, revelations kind of thing. Um, Dalton, when you are hearing uh this kind of priest talking about like the failing of the monolith of society and like the rising of the many around it, you have heard maybe from your mother, maybe from your father, some of the whispers of the Republicans who talk about the failing republic, or rather the failing empire, and the rise of the rule of the many. And you can kind of pick out some of this like language and how that priest is describing it. With that, like, I assume yours is higher than the actual 16 um with your bonus, but like the fact of the matter is 15, you 100% recognize like the Republican rhetoric of this, that this is like political talk that you are hearing right now inside of what would normally be like a religious place. And that kind of stands out to you, is like picking up these are like Republicans, which I should clarify is like illegal inside of the empire. The Republicans are kind of like a whispered, like plague almost. The 12 commissars, they're not like outwardly against them, but it's one of those things where they're persecuted without necessarily right now being recognized as existing.
Gotcha. Okay, so Dalton will probably do his best to not kind of display any. I mean, he's not a big thinker probably on politics, so he would definitely find it interesting, but he probably wouldn't be exactly sure what he actually kind of like. He wouldn't really be able to draw any bigger conclusions. He'd kind of like filing it away to. think
You
on
might
for
not
later.
yet connect the dots, but part of the result of the republicanism, the rise of republicanism, I feel like that works. Part of the rise of republicanism is definitely Delvers gaining riches. It is individuals who do not have standing in the city becoming wealthier and wealthier. And that's definitely part of it, is like this recognition that like the emperor is a dying breed. So it's one of those things where the more often you find yourself in contact with Republicans, like the more often you might find yourself hearing stuff that it definitely connects with, like how Dalton lives his life, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he's definitely not like an Empire supporter. It's more like he's almost like not apolitical, but like he's never, he lives his life and he kind of but now maybe he'll have to think about it more, like maybe if there's something to these signs, and then these, there's more whispers about and I think actually even Clemtas had mentioned something about kind of very vaguely. So yeah, he's definitely kind of food for thought.
Yeah, I believe Kalimtas is among the Republican movement, and that is part of why most of his wealth has been reinvested in trying to bring others out of poverty. It's trying to invest in his like immediate surroundings, kind of thing. But yeah,
So,
that just kind of
so
go
while
ahead.
this
What do you
is
think?
going on, Jinx has obviously been rolling absolutely horrendously, and this feels like pure propaganda. So I'm gonna just assume that that means he is like full on buying it. He's never heard of this stuff before. All of a sudden, it's starting to make sense. So he's like fully enamored, and he's gonna continue the conversation, etc. But my main goal is to try to get in that chair.
Gotcha. Let me have you do a.
I feel like my whole life I've been done a disservice. No one has even spoken to me about these things. They've never crossed another's lips into my ears. Because honestly, if I could sit in that chair and gaze upon this, I think, well, I might just join up or whatever.
I mean, I think let me just have you do a persuasion.
You know what? I think I'm going deception because there's no way I'm actually going to join, like intentionally. So is that okay?
I mean, I don't necessarily think there's going to be a big difference for you to have a deception versus a persuasion. But part of why I say persuasion is because I feel like your whole conversation isn't necessarily about whether you're going to join or not. It's that, like you said, you're kind of buying what they're talking about. And again, in very similar realms of saying, like, this is partly how Delvers affect the city, is bringing in like the republican kind of view of like individuals. The actual idea of reading the sky is perhaps the crazy, and you don't necessarily have to buy it. That's their religion.
All
um
right. So it's a 24 persuasion to get in that chair.
Yeah, so I'd say kind of like over the course of, like a conversation where say like a half hour or so goes by, where like this individual is like kind of staring into it and you guys are just like chatting up the like priests kind of are all around it. Um there is eventually like all of a sudden a point where the priest is like the high priest is like standing up and almost like pushing Jinx into the chair, like, no, 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 you have to see this. And he's like, as if you kind of like reverse. um Damn, why can't I think of the fucking phrase?
Reverse psychology?
Yeah, like use like reverse psychology. Like he's forcing you to look, not that you are trying to convince him
to let you look. You're just kind of like basically turning it on them. And you find this man kind of like forcing you to look. But yeah, it gives you a chance to kind of like look up into the sky. You basically will see this comet that you guys were looking at, and again, it's kind of like a little bit bigger than like your thumb, like with your arm like outreached. Under this telescope, you're looking at it like say like 150 magnitude, where it is almost the entirety of the oculus is filled with the comet. Big bright white star, long blue and purple tail kind of extending off from it. And with this view, you see that the actual tail is far more like magnificently colored than what it looks like, just kind of like looking up at it. And you can see kind of like the like almost like flow of the dust instead of it just looking like bright colors. You're able to kind of like look up and see much more of the like actual form of this thing rather than simply just the bright light in the daylight sky.
Dalton, we can't leave till you look too. Gotta take a look at this.
So while you're like looking, you like quickly throw Dalton into the seat, and the others are just like everybody is generally going to be dumbfounded as essentially here. Only the high priest has actually really looked, and now you guys have kind of like jumped to the seat, taking a look up at this portent of doom. And most of these people are just kind of like they've only seen it kind of described.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
So yeah, so I was just say like so Dalton will kind of when Jinx kind of is finished and suggests he goes to take a look. Dalton will and probably give like a as he like kind of sees it, he'll give a little kind of whistle of appreciation just at like kind of the sight of it. I was gonna say like while Jinx was kind of speaking with the high priest and about getting the look, Dalton was going to try and essentially kind of look around at like the other gathered like robed figures and see. I don't know if he was with Jinx and Malchin when they um, saw that second priest, or if he just got like a description from them. But he was gonna essentially try to casually like look around and see if he can see the person they're out there, the priest they were looking for, the second one.
They they only effectively got a description from like the working crew who was rebuilding that section of Midtown where the fire was at Torian Crans. So they were like talking to a crew who I think we determined it's just under 3 months ago that that place burned down when Eugene and Vabuza were over there. So now when they went back, there was already a crew like building up new houses there, and they were like almost finished kind of thing. So you're getting like um basically a story from guys who saw this that long ago. But if you can roll me a perception check and let's go at disadvantage to see if you recognize any signs from those descriptions that like kind of clue you into who it might be here.
That will be a 7.
7. So from your understanding, the description, um, the general robes of the priests of the Watchers of the Sky fits that description. But in the long run, from what you understand, from what they understood, it doesn't really clue you in too much about who it was, so much as that it was a priest of the Watcher of the Skies.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
At some point in time, could we do like formal introduction to the priest or whatever to get his name as well?
The younger priest, or are you talking about getting the attention of the high priest?
Like the high priest.
So when you kind of like um, shuffle Dalton into the seat, he'll kind of like look to you and Dalton can take his look and whatnot. He's not going to have as long because it's like not under the insistence of the high priest. And he'll kind of see, and almost like comes to his senses for a moment, as like the conversation kind of like wanes on that like distraction and reverse psychology. I'm sorry, son, you'll have to, and he kind of like starts to kind of like move Dalton out of the seat and returns himself, and he'll sit back down, and you kind of have a return to kind of this. His attention is still drawn to this object, and with that sense kind of like got one past him to find yourself in that seat. He's not necessarily paying too much attention of the actual conversation around him anymore. um so he'll just like, as you start to like actually ask him anything, um, you'll see him almost like waving a hand, and one of the other priests, like Casmius, will kind of like return and uh uh shit, I name again. Um Master Idelstein can certainly answer questions if he must, but that is traditionally only done during the hours that we are under tutor. Um, he must, you see, do everything he can to observe while we have the chance to see what can be seen. Um, if there's anything else that I can answer, I can certainly attempt to answer your questions. But essentially, Casmius is kind of like coming to the forefront again to answer any questions for
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. Goals met. We found out a little bit about the actual religion. Do we have any further information about the guy, the priest that came down looking, or was that basically all we had?
Let me have you roll a history check. I think just give me a straight intelligence, honestly.
It's a smooth 5.
Um, and do you have perception just as a proficiency? If I ask you for an intelligence perception check, um,
Yeah, I have perception proficiency.
gotcha. So, what is it? Your intelligence is a 0. You rolled a 5, and then your proficiency is +2 right now. So 7.
Yeah, that's it. 7. I could use my inspiration on this because I really do want to try to figure out what the heck's going on. So,
I'll give you the use it as a D6 to like do a modifier to it. But that's one of those things where normally I want you to like ask for advantage.
oh yeah,
Um,
that's what I meant. I was trying to get it above 10,
so
but I got a 1.
yeah.
So
Oh, you just rolled it and got a 1 too?
yeah, it's just not meant to be.
Yeah, I was thinking it's got to be above 10 anyways. Um, yeah, I I don't feel like I can narrow it too much more down. 5 of the priests are male, 3 of them are female. So that tells you at least some things, that it's not the 3 who can't impregnate her. Um, I think that's like part of what you can learn having come here. Um,
I guess maybe I'm tempted to say, um, can at least rule out like Casmius and maybe one other of the younger priests, or at least kind of assume them ruled out. Um, Assuming they like keep any sort of vows. But I also don't necessarily think you guys need to understand that their vows would be the same as like another priest's to keep any level of like celibacy. Um, so I'm not sure if you really have any further like ruling out anything from these five priests. I feel like that's kind of the end result here. Is you've come here, you've met their priesthood, um, and you at least have it like potentially rule down to like these five men who are currently watching this comet.
So we could be like straight up and ask them about the situation, or potentially about her, or just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, I think we might not want to be too direct with our questioning just yet.
So should we do a subtle name drop, or are you saying just leave it out altogether?
Thinking maybe for now, like what we've kind of like we've introduced ourselves, we've expressed some interest in the observatory. Maybe we kind of rather than kind of pressing the luck now, kind of um, give it a think and see if maybe they're like figure out some way we might be able to approach um, kind of how we might learn a little bit more without just kind of openly starting to question them.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So if you guys are thinking of other ways that you can assess more information about what you've picked out without necessarily cluing in these people about what you are asking, can you think of another way to ask these people without asking these people?
Are there any like aside from the robed figures themselves? Are there's like is there like lay worshippers or congregants in here now, or perhaps we could ask brother. I think you said Casmius mentioned something about like instruction times. Like if there is, I don't know. If we try to, you know, introduce ourselves to a couple other like congregants and just people. I mean, people talk, people gossip.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like on some level, part of what I was getting at is I feel like there's probably a certain time where they actually like are at study. And it's just one of those things where like um I don't think there's any reason that you wouldn't understand now from at least being with these people and the conversation that you guys would have had over like this hour or so that's passed by now, that this is indeed a comet, in the understanding that they know this thing is coming, will pass by, and will leave the view of your world. And that's part of why, like, for now, the high priest is staying watching this thing pretty much constantly to see signs. Because again, this is effectively their religion. The sky will tell us the truth of life, kind of thing. Um, so I'm not necessarily trying to say that there's like an actual time coming up where he's going to be teaching, so much as like he was kind of referring to that idea that like for right now the priest is like this is what he's going to be doing until we can't see this thing any further. Um, I don't see a reason why. there wouldn't necessarily be lay people here because otherwise I couldn't keep you here, other than just kind of the idea that, again, like, I think of this as the type of thing where there's not like religious people in the same way. Um, it's kind of weird to me because, like, this to me is like the religion of like astrology. Like, I'm not sure if I can really say like people who believe in astrology would go to a church of astrology. Um, but maybe you could like find people in the library. That kind of wasn't really what I was getting at. Part of what I was getting at is if you guys went to Fawn and you asked her questions, you might be able to get her to give you information simply by how she reacts.
Okay, I gotcha. So one
Kind
other
of the thing
idea
of
I
like,
had.
go ahead.
So Dalton could, you know, he could try to essentially disguise himself as Fawn. If we leave here and then he could essentially try to disguise himself as Fawn using magic and kind of come back in and you know have kind of see what sort of reaction, like if anybody kind of tenses up, or we could just go ask Fawn first.
So, assuming you guys are at least like somewhat like cleared away from this, I think if you brought up that idea of actually coming in here disguised as Fawn, that's got to, at least in my opinion, be slightly more extreme than simply dropping the name. It doesn't attach it to you, but it's got to be more extreme than that. What does Jinx think?
I think if we could like kind of narrow it down to say like the five priests or whatever, I would just spend a little bit of time getting to know each of them, so that we could potentially uh, do the reaction plan Dalton said at some point in time.
So that's just the idea of like questioning Fawn and seeing if she kind of like gives a reaction based on the priest that you describe.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that was a good idea.
And what do you think about either coming in disguised as Fawn or dropping the name before you guys go? I feel like those are the three directions you guys have right now. You have a decision on which one is what you'll go for.
Yeah, I guess if we're gonna go that route, which I'm not opposed to, if Dalton wants to do that, obviously he can do that. It might be worth just straight up dropping the name first because that obviously would like be a little more extreme, especially if it gets discovered.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards like kind of like speaking with speaking with the priest in here, and then maybe like if the next time we see Fawn, not even either we could either kind of like speak with her directly, or even just kind of talk a little bit loudly so that she overhears and try to see if like our mention of a particular name or something like that kind of triggers any sort of reaction in her. Yeah, because now that I'm thinking about it, like Dalton's plan, like because we don't really know the full nature of the relationship. Like we have our suspicions, but we don't know like is it you know we don't really know what kind of sort of reaction we might get. So that's probably a little too extreme as a first resort.
So you don't want to come in here as Fawn. Do you want to drop the name before you go?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're trying to get to the bottom of this, so maybe we can just like kind of casually mention her name in conversation, not specifically be like the fawn, the seamstress. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. So what do you think that sentence sounds like? Are you like speaking to Casmius, but being loud enough that like hopefully like all nine priests hear? Is that kind of what you're going for?
Yeah, I guess I'll give Dalton the heads up that I'm gonna do it to kind of like get in a position where you can see like multiple faces and kind of clock reactions. And then yeah, I think I would go for that, execute that.
But what do you think that sounds like? Do you have any idea how you're going to mix it into the conversation?
Yeah, so I guess I will basically say something to the effect of yeah, I'm actually rather glad that I heard of this religion, this whole movement and everything. I really had grown up in the city and never even been introduced to it. If it wasn't for a situation with my friend Fawn down there, they had told me that one of your group was down there in these robes, asking questions and checking up. And I feel like it was a sign. It all led me right here. So kind of like play with like the destiny, you know what I mean? All these things happen right in a row, and now I'm here and like enamored, and the comet's like in the sky.
Um, yeah, let me get I think just insights from both of you. I think it's the same as your perception. Both kind of fit the same idea. Trying to pick up on how people react to hearing you kind of like say this.
So Jinx is 13.
24 for Dalton.
So I think Jinx overall, you don't really notice a whole lot of change from any of these priests. Nobody really reacts too much. Um Dalton, as you're kind of like watching over things, you actually kind of like notice the high priest almost like clenches down on his thigh, and you'd see as he like hears this name and like this description and just like rips so freaking hard down on his thigh. Like you can see that he's like reaching like through almost like enough that you would expect him to like be bruising himself in this like moment. But otherwise, like then his like left arm just kind of going fully clenched. Um, that like little bit of kind of like force doesn't otherwise react.
Gotcha. So Dalton will is not going to say anything at the moment. He's going to try essentially pretend like he, you know, didn't see that, but he will. He'll kind of like step back up to Jinx and kind of just like clasp her on the shoulder and speaking of your friend, those we should probably be getting back. Do you think? I think we've taken up enough of these fine folks' time for now.
No, I agree. We were blessed to be able to see what we did and learn what we did, and I think we've overstayed our welcome.
Yeah, I mean overall, like you guys haven't necessarily like had like a negative experience here. I think maybe Casmius would kind of like respond, oh no, no, please. Watcher of the Skies is open to any who care to study the fate of the world. Please do not consider yourselves unwelcome. We would rather say that you are always welcome. All the children of Tolus are welcome.
Oh, I didn't mean any offense by it. We've definitely felt welcome and very appreciative as well. I just meant more that, this is a once in a lifetime event and it's only going to be here for so long. I'd hate to take up your precious time.
Oh, I understand that fully. I'm very sorry. Any questions that you might have had for Father Edelstein is it is indeed such a unique occasion that he is predisposed. That is, of course, our apologies. But under normal circumstances, you are, of course, always welcome.
Much appreciated, Casmius, and thank Matt Sittelstein for his hospitality as well.
Yes, very appreciative of the old gaze there and all the knowledge as well.
So yeah, you guys can, if that's all the questions that you care to kind of ask here, you can kind of like start to walk away again as you like head out of the observatory and back onto the streets of Tolis. Kind of like looking back, you can certainly see um maybe like a little bit of his attention is kind of like drawn away as Father Idelstein kind of like speaks over to Casmius, but after a few moments of like just grabbing his attention like it all kind of thing, his eyes are still right back to the actual telescope, and he continues basically to stare off into the sky.
Yeah, and once we've kind of left the observatory and are kind of walking um, kind of on the street again, Dalton will kind of looking to Jinx. Well, Father Edelstein certainly seemed to tense up a bit when you mentioned a particular name.
Is that right? I didn't notice anything. I was starting to believe that that was a sort of dead end. And maybe all that fate talk was actually the truth.
Well, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, but
Are you sure? You noticed for sure he reacted when I said a name?
well, unless he had a sudden coincidental spasm in his leg, I would say it certainly seems so. I'm sure Fawn could confirm if we happen to drop Idelstein's name in her presence.
So it's either him or at least he's privy to it. I think I've kind of, well, perhaps we could get him alone and speak to him in private. But I don't know. Is it better to just go to Fawn? I still feel a little uneasy after what I tried to pull.
Well, perhaps we don't immediately question her directly, but what if we spoke uh, with Brother Fabidus, see if he's heard of this Idelstein, if he knows anything of him.
Maybe we're going about this all wrong. Maybe this is it's just wasting our attention, our energy, and we should be looking more for the killer. Maybe we need to get with Malchin and ask him a little more about the kids. Oh, damn it. I forgot. I meant to ask about the ruin thing that he said, the ruin marks. Can we retcon that?
Oh, what did you have in mind about the rune bears?
Oh, I just wanted to hear more about it because I feel like that was the first time it was like actually mentioned. Like I mean, I kind of get like the impression that it was like a mark or a tattoo, like that they were born with or whatever. But I just want to like inquire more about essentially what it is.
Um, yeah, so kind of like speaking with them with like Casmius about it, you can kind of gather well, many understand the rune bears to be children who have been conceived on nights of the solstice, those born under signs such as this comet, those who are making the news these days. Some see them as children who have physical markings. Others recognize them as children who develop signs as they age. Uh, it's very difficult, even for somebody so learned as Father Iddelstein, to recognize whether a rune bearer is this or that. It's part of trying to understand the skies themselves is to recognize what it would to be a rune bearer. We're all born under different signs. We all show different marks. Some, though, have much more meaning. Children who are born at the arrival of this comet, for one. Children who are born when the comet leaves from view will be another. Those children who are born because they were conceived under the comet, another. And that is all just the recognition of the comet itself. There's many ways to interpret the signs. But in the long run, part of what I would get to, like, beyond just what I can actually like bring up in a RP moment, is to recognize this is the idea of like finding significance in your horoscope. Um, like I'm definitely down to read horoscope stuff because I find it mildly entertaining. But it's one of those things like if you're somebody who's really like sold on it, I mean, you could throw away all of your money because it's everything you believe in. And it's one of those things where it's just like, how far do you want to take it? Because there's a sign, you could find a sign that everybody is like attached to. You know what I mean? Like if he talked to Jinx long enough, he could eventually, um, tell you all of your signs that the sky has told us about you, Jinx. Um, maybe he can tell you a little bit less than he can tell Dalton, because Jinx was born and lived in an orphanage. So you don't know as much about when you were actually born. But it doesn't mean that they can't sell you some snake oil anyways.
Okay, hell yeah. I just wanted to like lock in. That was one point that I just meant to ask, and then it kind of slips by at moment. So
Yeah, I would say in the long run, that's almost like the type of thing where um, that's like where coming here and talking to them, going through their library is certainly a potential. I think it's something where going through a library like the Delvers Guild, since you have access to it, might have potential. But it's definitely one of those things where so much of it is just a matter of interpretation. And then a lot of it just comes down to like where you go to do the research. I would say in general, Delver's Guild's always going to be a little bit more kind of like secular knowledge kind of thing, where it's like, yeah, hey, there was a comet overhead on these dates, this, and this. Whereas like this place, I'm definitely trying to go for that, like, I don't know, like aloof, kind of like forlorn, um, incense smell in the air kind of feeling of like a psychic kind of thing.
oh yeah, I like it. I like it.
But yeah, theoretically, Casmius can certainly share that, and it gives you guys a little bit more a sense of um, when you start to talk about like rune bears. Um, Part of what I would kind of like want you to step away from is like they're telling you like in the news like 3 kids were murdered over this, but like what you're getting told here at this place is it's like there's going to be like 50 or 100 kids who could be, like air quotes like rune bears because of this fucking comet overhead. And all of a sudden you're going to like start to just see like if people are willing to kill over this, hundreds of people can get killed purely because of this thing going overhead.
And it's like whether or not the signs are real, people believe it. That's enough, and act on it. Yeah, sounds like it's a self in self. Um, I'm blanking on what I'm trying to say. Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Well, and it makes sense too with what he was saying about basically that, the people born on the day when the comet passes, and then every other day that it's still visible, and then the day after it's gone, and then 1 week from then, it's like there's like significance in everything. And if they think sacrificing these kids is like a means to an end, it sounds like a horrible cult.
So I don't know if there's necessarily any more information to be gained by speaking with Fawn about this again, other than essentially confirming that Helmut Idelstein is indeed the father of her child. Um, I think that is effectively what you guys would gain by actually conversing with her. And we're getting to where I'd like to like kind of wind up the session just as much as kind of continue forward. So I'm curious if you guys actually have any thoughts or questions. Like largely she's ignorant still of many things. And it kind of sits into this idea like going back to her only kind of confirms that she reacts when you guys bring up his name. So I'm curious if you guys have any other thoughts, like how you go about furthering this investigation at present.
So I guess I was in like if she essentially confirms that he is indeed the father, I guess Delton would kind of try to kind of ask her like, does he seem glad, upset about that? Delton's almost thinking, what if he doesn't, because if the information, if this gets out, he could, he's got a high position, he could be in some trouble or something. So maybe I don't know, maybe he's behind the threat to her. So he wants to try and kind of suss out like, does he, she got any sense of him being, angry or upset or anything like that about the child.
Let me get a insight from the two of you. I don't understand any reason why the priests of the Watcher of the Skies cannot take their, I don't want to simply say lovers, but that's kind of what I'm gonna get to. I guess like mates. She's not like actually married, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of one of those things where, oh yeah, I just have to. We'll schedule a marriage for, and he just like strings her along, kind of thing. Um, but she's just kind of like, I don't understand why he seems so aloof and detached. I and you can basically with both of you rolling effectively. I mean, those are dirty 20s as far as I'm concerned. Over 15, you guys can kind of pick up like on some level. She's kind of like coming forward with information, like recognizing like at some point it was almost as if he knew um that she was pregnant before she did. Something happened that changed their relationship and how they were going about their tryst, their little affair. and she basically started to get morning sickness and get sick after he kind of stopped almost like seeing her. And that was all maybe say like 2 weeks or 3 weeks before you all met her. So as you kind of guys go about this, you're gonna kind of recognize that whatever he stares at the sky for, um, he picked up some sign that she was pregnant, or at least something was happening. um their relationship kind of changed, and she didn't really want to like betray his trust by sharing any of that information purely based on this idea, like, because she doesn't know why anything was a problem, and is almost like kind of lost in that, like, hopefully something goes back to normal. um Yeah, I hope I don't really ruin it by kind of breaking it down like that, but I feel like that's kind of like the general conversation she's going to have, and sort of with those kind of insights, what you guys can take out of it is like less and more explicit speech on how like the things played out.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting like this like, well, the idea kind of in my head is, okay, so he discovered she was pregnant, and then he would have at least, depending on how often they get together, he would have a pretty good idea of when it happened, if he kind of knows how far along she is, and then if you can extrapolate out, I don't know, maybe, yeah, something about something he saw, or something he thinks he saw, or something he's interpreting, whether correctly or incorrectly, or whatever, is you know um Dalton's still thinking that maybe he's behind all this, and the reason, like, if he
Is
thinks that the end result is going to be something bad, maybe he's trying to get out ahead of it, change fate, as it were.
Let me have the two of you do an investigation here.
21.
And 15 for me.
Yeah, so say you guys like start to run with that idea, that you're starting to like question the dates. If you go back and kind of like go into the Delver's library and take some time to like look over things, depending on how much you guys know about like female anatomy and like actual birthing, like you're like checking up on everything, creating like this little path to recognize like when these two probably conceived this baby based on how she kind of described it. And you're basically going to like come to recognize it's like on the winter solstice that baby was likely conceived, 1 or 2 days, like around that. But regardless, like that basically is the significance, that is potentially that like what kind of lead you there. And it's the same idea that with most all religions, there is some sort of holiday, if not holy days, surrounding all four of the solstices. But you basically will kind of come to find, that Fawn's child is indeed conceived on a solstice. And that would pretty well confirm your suspicions that, if you're putting her, um, at the chance of having a rune bearer as a child, she probably has a child who can be called a rune bearer.
Okay, yeah, and then I guess the question is, if it Edelstein could come to the same conclusion. Is he behind the threat, or does somebody else know? Or so we still don't know, but it definitely, I think, kind of puts a couple more of the pieces together.
I might have said that wrong. I think it should be the fall solstice.
So there's a summer
Maybe that's not a
solstice, the
solstice.
winter solstice, and then the equinoxes, right? Spring
Yeah, the
and fall
equinox. Yeah,
equinox.
I think it should be fall equinox. My bad. Trying to tie it in with like when they actually played, and I like plugged her into the story.
But yeah, I think maybe, so kind of once we've kind of done that research, and I think Jinx is right that maybe we should speak to Malchin and find out what he knows before we kind of do anything else.
Yeah, and again, kind of in the sense of like wrapping things up so we can kind of start at that point. Part of what I'm kind of getting at here is you guys are welcome to talk to Malchin and Chris. But again, I don't think he necessarily has a whole lot to add to this, other than he was the first person I dropped the first breadcrumb for this about. And things are just coming closer and closer. You're connecting more and more dots to these things. But I do think basically Chris is a potential thing. That's just for the fun of role playing it, not necessarily more information. And then figuring out whether Idelstein is actually some sort of like evil criminal, or like where his kind of like where, why, what, and kind of like what means he was kind of doing this by. Um, Things are pointing towards him, but you don't necessarily know to what extent, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at.
It does seem strange though because they were like trying to potentially kill her or at least like stop her from having the kid. But the whole point is to like sacrifice the kids. So it wouldn't make a ton of sense unless he like would not want to sacrifice his own kid. Therefore, if it's born, now he has to figure out what he's going to do.
Or if there's something tied to a sacrifice of a rune bearer child, right? One way to prevent that from happening is to kill it before then.
Yeah, and that's part of what I was getting at. Like the Night of Dissolution is part of what the Rune Bears are supposed to bring. But it's one of those things where this is like a thing that's talked about, but nobody really knows what it's going to mean until it comes. And that alone is kind of part of the confusion is like, what is the significance?
Yeah, this is definitely giving me something, a bit of the vibes of the same. There's like forget the name of it, but there's a prophecy in The Witcher about like certain children born on a certain day and like under a blood moon or something like that. But then there's like all these different like interpretations and different factions thinking like, oh, what it means and like what to do about it and all that sort of stuff.
What did you guys get on that research that basically like tied into like going to? I think it was the last one. I like tied it into going to the Delvers library. Was that a
21.
21? And
I
then
think mine was a
15.
15.
Um, yeah. So I don't necessarily have this part prepared right now. I think it would be enough to also bring up a little bit more information on rune bearers. I think Jinx at very least was kind of curious about that. Like that's why you went back to Casmius there. So rune bearers are talked of in a different context, like the people who bear runes of power are almost like spoken of as like people who have kind of special powers beyond like things other than magic, things other than technology, almost like birthrights. And it would tie closely into how like sorcerers manifest magic. Um, in many ways, it's part of what I'm kind of curious about often about when you think about a bard, whether a bard is closer to like a sorcerer and how they create magic, or are they closer to like a wizard in how they create magic. But there's something kind of different because it's often in how you tell stories that bards like use magic, but it's still almost more innate like a sorcerer. Um, but the rune bearers are something other. They're powerful individuals, and this is like from kind of a more like factual, like secular kind of reference. it doesn't really get into the why or what causes it. This is just the fact, like, almost kind of talking about like hundreds of years ago, like the rune bearers of yore, who, like, when they would like do this, this, and this, like you could see signs of like this great fighter who could like um through like a ritual, like basically like his arms would start to glow bright fiery colors and his size would grow to like 3 times that of a human. You would basically kind of see stuff like, or almost like read about descriptions where supernatural things happen almost from some sort of physical interaction. um and it's, again, like, not talking about like, oh, this person was born on this special day, so they got special powers. But it's like some sense of like, we don't know why. We just know the rune bearers were these super powerful beings. And I think that's something that you guys could also gather from going to the Delvers Guild, is to recognize the rune bearers as some sort of supernatural thing.
And you kept referring to them as like babies or children. Are there like adult, like people that have grown up that are rune bearers?
Um, guess for the sake of not like calling for another role, hmm, let's go for, there are no adult rune bears like talked about in the books that you find. It is all many generations in the past. Um, the last rune bears that I think you can find were during, I want to say, the reign of Gull, but I feel like it's the middle. Oh yeah, this is going to be one of the first times you guys actually come in contact with like the evil that created the spire. Yeah, so I'm gonna say, when you're looking into like the actual history of the rune bearers, the last time you read of when there were rune bearers was during the reign, I think it's just gonna say the second Dark Lord. Um I think Gull might be right though. Ghul.
Yeah, that name sounds familiar from what I've read of Tolis. Um, but just to clarify, do we actually come across that name, like, yeah, or do Dalton and Jinx do it, or is it just a reference to the, is it almost like Voldemort, like the second Dark Lord, rather than actually mentioning the name?
On some level, I think it's enough that you guys can recognize like this as someone connected to the spire. I would say it starts to get into the thing because I can't just do lore drops or it just gets like boring kind of thing. It has to almost be like little bits and little reasons why you can learn more. That's just something that I know for a fact about, like sharing the world with you kind of thing. But yeah, I would say at this point it's kind of like, it's almost like beyond history, simply because how of things have kind of gone, that like the name is almost like synonymous with like evil and like war times, pre Lothian, pre the empire. So I think that's part of where, like, do you guys come across it? Yes. Do you fully understand like kind of the meanings behind it? No. But you can also recognize on some level this is part of like what the Bane Warrens are, like what a lot of the underground under the city is like the creation of this evil. And that's more what I would say Gull kind of evokes, is like a sense of kind of like the mysterious pure evil that is kind of all around Polis. And again, part of one of the things that I want to constantly like reiterate is when you're walking around the city, like the spire always has this weird psychological effect. You get used to it, but it always has like an evil, um, like draining, kind of like exhausting feeling of how it like sits on your chest, like holds over. It reminds me of like being in Ohio and stepping outside on a really hot, really high humid day where you just step outside and you like lose energy purely by like hot and heavy and moist it is outside. You just feel like, oh, I need a nap. And it's just like that's almost like what the spire is. It's just like you don't always recognize it's there, but it's exhausting, like that evil.
And do we know like anything about the history of the spire or anything?
Vastly no. This is again kind of where you're kind of coming into like some of the first bits of information that starts to talk about it.
Okay, it's just like something that's always there and it has like sort of like a mythical like kind of allusion to it, but you don't know exactly where it came from or what it is.
Yeah, I don't think most of the city remembers enough to know about the Dark Lords, let alone to know either of their names or to connect the Dark Lord to that name. And that's one of those things of why like Gull is almost enough that it like evokes the feeling of the evil, doesn't even necessarily tell you yet that you should be looking for like an actual lord who called themselves Gull, or that you can look into like the history of the Gull Wars. Like all of this stuff is almost like kind of in that almost like mythologically like lost to time. There's elves who could talk about it, but it doesn't mean that anybody does. And that's one of those things where again, this is like just kind of getting into the first little like hints of these things.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I feel like if you were like born somewhere and something was just always some way, like whatever people told you about it, you would just like believe it and maybe not even inquire. I imagine that's how it would feel like growing up like near like the pyramids or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely feel like it's one of those things for sure. Like the wonder of those things has got to be reduced by growing up in like Cairo in the same way as like somebody who's coming to Tolis to look up into this spire that like reaches into the sky would be daunting. Most days you can't even see halfway up the spire. Uh, but to grow up here, to always have this like finger pointing into the sky would seem just all too normal.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking of like a a city or a village like at the near a volcano that erupted like a few hundred years ago, but now is quote unquote dormant, but never um, theoretically could blow again at any time.
Thank you all very much for listening today as we entered the world of Tola, City by the Spire. As always, I am your Dungeon Master, Marathustra. It is a pleasure to have you listening with us. Have a wonderful evening here and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Please don't hesitate to listen to our streams live over on Twitch with Dice Never Lie Gaming Network, or wait for our next release of the video on YouTube. Thank you as always for taking the time to us, whether you are a player making sure that their notes are complete, or you are someone who enjoys sharing the tabletop RPG experience with us. We've been playing with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition here today, and a special homebrewed version of Tolis, City by the Spire, as written by Monty. I have maps from all over content creators from Reddit, as well as making some myself, and some are directly out of the digital purchase of Tolis as well. As always, I appreciate you for coming to visit us, And I would 100% recommend that if you are interested in a quite diverse and quite well written campaign setting, Tolus is a beautiful thing. With that in mind, though, later this month in April, we are hoping to start off a homebrew creation of my own and enter into a new world. We're kind of, I don't want to step away from the West March idea of what Tolus is, but at the same time, I do understand why a lot of more experienced DMs have pitched the idea that a West March shouldn't necessarily be done in a safe place like a city. And that's one of those reasons why I would like to move to a frontier location. In my own world of Asterion, I was hoping to start this off later around the 20th of April, and hopefully we'll be doing that. But with how things play out, we'll see when we start the first of session zeros for this, and hopefully again creating this as a West March, have multiple groups of players who are switching around when they are ready and when they are available, playing as things go. But otherwise, as always, this is DM Marathus. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much. Be well and enjoy your Easter. Thank you all.